morning, everybody, and welcome to the program. As you can tell, I'm flying solo for the moment because, as we say here in Houston, my co host Andrea Gomez has had a major malfunction, but she's on the way, so you'll see the camera's on me, and so we don't see her walking in late. We'll give her some grief, and then she'll set up, and then Mark will put out a two shot so you can see everybody. But welcome to the program. Welcome to the second week of 2022 with a pandemic still in full swing, but the Omicron variant is now pretty much prevalent in our state here in Texas, affecting everybody that's fully vaxxed and the unvaxxed the same. Here in our county, our county judge has raised, I'm sure she was waiting to do this, our awareness level, if you might want to call it that, to a red, which means the highest alert level for the pandemic. I don't know what's going on in the rest of the 253 counties in Texas, but apparently this thing, from what I'm reading, is short-lived. It's rather mild. And sort of resolves fairly quickly. I think I was exposed to it. Woke up a couple weeks ago with a sore throat and a headache, but it worked out pretty well. So I'm here and surviving. I did, interestingly enough, watching some of the Senate hearings, as you probably may or may not know. Senator Rand Paul and Dr. Fauci have gotten into some lively exchanges. Rand Paul was criticizing Fauci for his criticism of three prominent epidemiologists, one from Stanford, one from Harvard, and one from the UK, and basically trying to make them seem like outliers with respect to their opinions on this virus. And then, of course, Dr. Fauci said he was getting tired of Senator Rand Paul jumping on him and accusing him falsely of things, and Rand Paul was actually reading from emails that he got a hold of, and accused Senator Paul of actually using Dr. Fauci as a whipping boy to raise money for his campaign. So we'll see how that plays out. My personal opinion is I think that for whatever reason, Dr. Fauci has lost credibility with respect to this issue. And it's challenging. I know he's got a tough job, but they said, well, once we have the vaccine and once we roll it out, everybody will be, we'll get our hands around this virus. And then, of course, we had the Delta variant, and then we came up with the second vaccine. They said, well, if everybody gets fully vaccinated on the second vaccine, we'll be okay. And then, of course, Omicron comes along, and so now they want us to boost, and the boost jab or the injection apparently doesn't work on Omicron, and so it's sort of, we're trying to beat Mother Nature, and Mother Nature, I think, is far smarter than science, although science has made some progress, but you were usually behind the curve. So hopefully, and having talked to a number of physicians here in Houston, because we have one of the largest medical centers in the world, and some epidemiologists, which we have a lot of respect for, that have been on our program. It's my understanding, just from a layperson's perspective, that these viruses, just like us, want to survive. I mean, viruses want to survive in the environment that they're in, and if they're killing the hosts, the virus won't last very long. So I think over time, the viruses sort of settle down and become less virulent, less toxic, so to speak, to the host. That means to us. So we'll see how this plays out. Hospitalizations, I think, are up a little bit, but fatalities, fortunately, are not. But politically, it's interesting to watch the exchange in Washington, how politicians try to get their arms around this, and we'll see how this plays out. So this morning, by the way, I will make an announcement to those of you that are concerned about our co-host. Andrea Gomez has just walked in, so she's setting up, and we'll have her shiny face on in a moment. But let's go back to Houston, Texas today, because we have local elections coming up. We have a vacancy in one of our city council positions. We have a city council member in Houston that represented District G. We have 5 at-large seats in Houston, and then we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on down the road, single-member districts. In District G, the incumbent city councilman decided to run for a vacated state representative position, and that's Greg Travis. So Greg Travis is leaving his position as Houston City Council member, and the mayor in Houston had to call a special election to fill that vacancy. There are a number of candidates running for that special election, which will be coming up soon. Early voting starts rather soon, and I'm going to let our host, our guest this morning, tell you about that. But the one of the gentlemen running for the District G position is a former Houston fire chief. Has served in the fire service for many, many years. He's a dear friend of mine who has been heavily involved not only on the public safety side in the leadership of the fire department, but also in the political side. He's been very active on a lot of city council races and helping candidates, helping mayoral candidates, and so I call him Chief, but he goes by the name of Raul Reyes, Roy Reyes. And so he is our guest this morning. And Chief, welcome. Can you hear me? And can we hear him?
I can hear you.
Great. Well, welcome aboard. Good news is that we are now joined by Andrea, so you'll have questions by the latecomer. But good to have you, Chief. For those of you that don't, for the viewers that don't know you, Chief, let's talk a little bit about your history. First of all, where are you from? Were you born in Houston? And then tell us about your public service history here in the city of Houston.
Thank you, Orlando. I'm originally from Corpus Christi. My family founded Corpus Christi in 1773, Blas Maria de la Garza Falcon. And through the many years, that's probably 11 generations back, every time there were children, the land was divided again. It was originally San Patricio in Nueces County. That was granted to him by the Spanish Queen. He was a captain with the Spanish cavalry. But we moved here at a time when Hurricane Carla first hit. I was a tot, but that kind of ages me back to the 60s. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. I served 4.5 years as a sergeant. And when I returned to Houston, I attended the University of Houston. I have a bachelor's degree in business. I have a master's degree in management, but specifically organizational development of management. I am a real estate broker for a commercial real estate office here in Houston, and I'm a public safety consultant. I joined the fire department at a very good time. I became a captain. I was promoted to captain, and then I was appointed as an assistant fire chief. And over that 4-year period that I was in the command staff, I commanded 3 different sections: staff services, which is the legal aspects of the fire department, community outreach, which is the public information officer, and then special operations, which is the hazmat, rescue, airport, and emergency management part of it. And so I got a great deal of experience in dealing with City Hall because I was assigned to represent the fire department with the mayor's executive committee. And so I got to see and meet a lot of department heads. I found out how city council works, how the mayor works, how the political process to get things done is also there. I spent 28 and a half years with the fire department. And when I left the fire department, I was selected to be the fire chief in Greenville, Texas, which is the east side of Dallas. And as anything else, like a judge, once you're a fire chief for a department, then you're called chief, just like a judge, whether you're sitting or not, is always called a judge after they leave. And so when I came back to Houston, I was asked to manage the emergency medical services for Tomball, Texas, which is ESDA, Northwest Harris County. And I also got selected to run operations for emergency management for Health and Human Services and Disaster Response Team out of San Antonio. And I was deployed to disasters anywhere in the United States, from California wildland fires to the gas explosions in New Hampshire to Puerto Rico, wherever the disasters happen. And so my background is in public safety for over 35 years. I've been in community service over the last 40 years, serving on approximately 20 different boards. So I'm very familiar with not just Houston, but in West Houston. I spent my entire career in District G on the west side, working out of 5 different fire stations in different capacities and different services. But primarily, I became very well aware and how to respond to disasters. The city does great for preparation. They do great for mitigation, which is responding to the disaster. But we do a terrible job as far as recovery. There's still people in Houston waiting for checks from FEMA from the Allison flood. And so you can imagine how long they're going to wait for Harvey. But anyway, that's my background, public safety and public community service for many years. I live in District G. I've been here for 21 years. I'm a conservative, and primarily in the primaries, I vote in the Republican side. So that's who I am. And so anything that you want to discuss, let's go into the election process.
Well, I mean, I'm glad that you bring up your background as a public safety servant in the city of Houston, because I think that, as we've always said, public safety and infrastructure are the 2 most important services that the city of Houston can provide. That means, providing a police officer, an ambulance, a fire truck, an extrication unit if you're in an automobile accident, make sure that you have clean water, that your toilets work, that there's adequate drainage in the city of Houston.
Or you run out of gas.
Or what do you mean run out of gas? I never said anything.
Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning, Chief. I met you long time ago in my time at Univision, and then I've been seeing you in a couple of events. Well, the reason that I was late, I ran out of gas. Shame on me.
Andrea doesn't understand that the E on the dashboard stands for empty and not excess. But anyway,
Talking about public safety, I was in the middle of the road.
Yeah, you're a hazard.
I was.
You're a road hazard. Well, anyway, good thing we didn't have to call the chief to come rescue you.
No, we didn't. But I'm glad that we have him on the show. So, Chief, one question, a couple of questions, but the first one, you're being, chief, and you're being always in public service and everything. What make you run for office? What make you decide, you were talking when you were saying about, you were talking about your background, what we need to be done in the city of Houston, but especially in your district, but in general, it's a lot of things that we need to achieve in Houston. So what make you run for office, and what is your proposal?
First of all, thank you. There's a couple of things. Number one is that, I used to know Orlando when I had a lot more hair on my head.
We both did.
We all know Orlando back in that time.
I'm aging myself, actually, but I'm retired. I stopped working for the state and for the San Antonio company because it was just way too many hours. I've been married for 49 years with 3 kids, and in discussions with my wife, I told her this was a 1.5-month campaign, and we have support from the community, and we have support from friends, and a few dollars out of my pocket as well, but I have enough to run the campaign. And it's an aggressive campaign, and I've been getting a lot of positive feedback that the worst case scenario for me would be to get in the runoff. And I said, well, that's enough for me. But the other part of that is I have the time, the commitment now, and the energy. I'm re-energized to be able to do the job, and I understand what needs to be done. I know how to handle or manipulate or maneuver through the maze that's City Hall. So my learning curve is going to be short. And so I'm qualified to do the job. I have the experience of City Hall, and it's a short campaign. And I've gotten a tremendous amount of support. And the demographics in Houston, the other catch-all is the demographics of Houston, especially in District G, from Beltway 8 all the way to Derry Ashford, from the Buffalo Bayou north to Westheimer on the south. The demographics there over the last 5 or 6 years has drastically changed. There's a high population of African American and Hispanics and Asians that have moved into the district. Um, and the information that I'm getting from them is they don't feel that they're being represented as well as the affluent neighborhoods are. There's a lot of work that's now being done, miraculously, now being done for street repairs and sewage and things, but it's not enough. As much work as it's been done, the north side of Gessner in Frostwood flooded Saturday again,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's more work to be done. Anyway, you asked the second part of the question. Are you asking specifically about the election process or what's going on as far as early voting is concerned?
No, my question is like, what is your platform? I mean, what is the issues that you want to address once if you get elected?
Oh, well, my philosophy on what needs to be done is what separates me from my colleagues, the ones also running, because I have. It seems that I have more insight as to what's going on in the city, but specifically, I don't like to reinvent the wheel. I like to use concepts that have worked in the past, and to get people to understand the water problem in Houston is that they're like, for example, the first thing is my top priority is crime, but it's equal to the flooding. On the crime side, I've spoken with Police Chief Finner on the possibility of opening up more storefronts in the area that I just mentioned and the parameter that I just mentioned, and that there seems to be a crime spike there. And historically, as in Greenspoint or Montrose area or the Ranchester Bel Air, when they put storefronts, there was a dramatic drop in crime. And I'm talking about every kind of crime, but mostly a lot of the petty things that are irritating to store owners and to the people that are trying to be safe. Um, so I wanted the storefront as one of the concepts. The other one was my colleagues keep talking about we have a shortage of manpower, and how do we repair the manpower for the police department specifically? And I told them, well, there's two things that need to be done there, but if there's a shortage of manpower, that doesn't mean you stop working on crime. And so back in the 80s and 90s, there was a concept of putting, because there was a shortage of manpower in the police department at that time as well, putting three or four police officers from Houston, three or four constables, three or four from the sheriff's department, creating task forces similar to criminal justice, criminal intelligence, that is, where they respond to high-profile crimes and or crimes of extreme violence, and then those are transitory, in that they move wherever the crime is moving. And if you put one of those type of task forces in each of the 11 single-member districts, that will have an immediate impact on the entire system of Houston as far as crime is concerned. But you can't blame the police department because they are part of the criminal justice system. If the criminal justice system is broken with the district attorney and the jail and the bond issues and everything else, and you keep letting out the same criminals, it's very demoralizing to police to have to keep rearresting the same people. And so there's a morale problem in the police department. But if there's a shortage, as was discussed maybe 10 years ago, we have police officers that are already certified that are leaving blue states because of demoralization and or mistreatment or disrespect or defunding. These people are already certified as peace officers that can come into Houston and through a 6 or 8 week training period can be acclimated to the Houston system. And so those ranks can be filled rather quickly if we do it in that respect. The other thing that needs to be done, the police
Yeah, well, let me
department.
ask you a question, though, real quick. I mean, I understand that we can recertify them as Texas peace officers, but where do we find the money? Because as I understand, as you mentioned correctly, we're several hundred, if not thousands, of police officers short in Houston. It is demoralizing when they're saying, defund the police. We don't need the police. We don't like the police. And then the police are, as you correctly point out, arresting the same violent criminals that are perpetrating crime. So where do we find the money? Because as you know, Chief, the city of Houston is struggling with a huge debt burden. And on top of that, which is an issue I want to get into, what they owe you and what they owe police officers and the municipal pension system. So they have a massive pension liability, and then a huge debt problem in the city of Houston. And then they have, of course, the city of Houston claims, well, we're in this situation not because we have spent irresponsibly, it's because we have a property tax cap. So talk to us about, how do you fund the police officers? How do you fund the pensions? How do you fund continued infrastructure improvements? I mean, what are your recommendations to the mayor?
If we're looking at this realistically, I don't believe, and I've heard others as well to agree with me, that Houston does not have a revenue problem. They have a spending problem. And by that, I mean every July 1st, there is a budget that's created for each of the departments, certified and voted on by city council. And if you live within the means of that budget, you have plenty of money to spend on the needs of the city to manage the city. What happens, unfortunately, is because we have a strong mayor form of government, and he has at least 8 city council members that historically vote with him, that the mayor decides on a regular basis to start spending money outside of the realm of the budget. And so by January, we don't have the money. And like this particular last fiscal, we had to use $200 million that came from the federal government for public safety. And that was used to overcome the $200 million shortfall in the city. And so that the process of that, if we already allocated for 54, 55, 5,600 police officers, the money's already been allocated for that. The fact of the matter is we can't recruit under the normal system of how we normally recruit raw recruits and then put them through the academy without being pre-certified. The money's there. And so with the cap system, even with that, there's plenty of money in that because my taxes keep going up because my valuation of my property keeps going up. So even with the cap, people are still going to be paying more on taxes for their home.
Well, there's no question the city of Houston faces tremendous financial burdens in the future. I can tell you, for example, that as the city continues to age, just to give you one example, I mean, not only do we have the burdens of hiring additional peace officers on the streets in an era where violent crime has spiked, but let's look at infrastructure. Drainage continues to be a huge problem. Our storm sewer system needs to be enhanced. The last time it was addressed was way back in the 1990s, and these systems don't last forever. And so these tend to be funded with what's called GO, general obligation bonds. But when you're sort of at your borrowing limit, in other words, the credit card says, just like our credit cards at home, we have a $10,000 limit and the city's almost maxed out. The question is, how are we going to balance the infrastructure and the public safety needs of the city of Houston in the future and continue to meet the obligations to the pensions that we were told several years ago by virtue of state legislation that it was fixed? It's not fixed. The burden continues to be a heavy burden. And, what are the solutions? Let's talk about the pension system first. How do we address the pension issue?
I think the thing that the people need to understand is that, unfortunately, the political aspects of what happened here is to blame the firefighters or the fire pension because they are successful. What they did is they had a collective bargaining agreement and they went to the state to make it a state statute. Now, the police and municipals are also on that statute, but they can change. You can change the state law with collective bargaining, or you can change it through the system that they use, the police and municipals use as far as meet and confer. The difference here is that under the system for the fire department, the city, by the way, that July 1st, money for all 3 pensions are already in that budget. If you run out of money, they do the other option, they borrow it. So from the fire department, they're mandated to pay their agreed upon money to the fire department's pension system every year. And the fire department hires some incredibly talented people to manage the money. And so the pension board, the pension is very solid with the Houston Fire Department. And so consequently, the police and the municipals, They have a meeting confer. What that basically means is that if the city runs out of money, they can stop paying on the benefits of the agreement, other than the pension system. And what they did, beginning with, yeah, Bill White. So it was about 13 or 14 years that the city just simply borrowed the money that they owed the police and the municipal employees every year, paying over an 8% interest on it. And so you forward now 12, 14 years, and now you're looking at $1 billion paying 8%. All of a sudden, it becomes an unfunded liability. And because the fire department was successful, we were blamed as to, well, we're taking too much money out of the system and we're not sharing the wealth and things of that nature. Well, that meeting confer is still there. And so when the $1 billion was taken out, and a small interest is now being paid on the municipal bonds, the city of Houston technically paid for the pension of the police and municipal twice. They paid for it every year in July when they agreed to the amount that was going to be paid to the pension. When that wasn't paid, it wasn't the city's fault, citizens' fault. The city simply chose to use that money elsewhere, outside the realm of the budget. And so now, when the bond was taken out for $1 billion, the city is still paying
No,
for it.
I understand, but look. Here, the argument has been made that there is still a huge burden to the city of Houston taxpayers to fund the pensions, and the argument is made that it is rare in this country now to have a defined benefit program. Are we ever going to move away from the defined benefit and do sort of like the county does, which is a hybrid system where employees actually pay into the system out of their paychecks?
I usually ask people that challenge me on that. Say, when I was in the fires and I was in the high rise and I ran out of oxygen, and I don't remember seeing anybody that is criticizing it next to me doing it. The life expectancy of a firefighter is between 62 to 67 years of age. The defined benefit guarantees that the firefighter, through living many years of hazardous conditions, that they're going to be guaranteed a set amount of pension and that their families will be taken care of in the event that something happens to that firefighter. The defined contribution is contingent on the market. And so there's a possibility that when the market drops, that the firefighters can lose their pension or lose a large section of their pension. And so if it changes to the defined contribution, then you're going to lose a lot of firefighters, because there's other cities in the country and the state that maintain the defined benefits, and we'll lose them, and especially those that are under 10 years in the service.
Yeah.
I'd hate for that to happen, but by the same token, unless you've been in my shoes, unless you've been in the firefighter's shoes, it's very difficult to criticize the fact that the city owes them at least a pension to retire on.
Okay. Let's move away from the pension. We're out of time here. Talk to us a little bit about when is the election? When does early voting start? What can people do to help you in your campaign? And as Andrea likes to say, what's the call to action?
Call to action.
Oh, yeah. The election started Monday, and the unusual thing that happened on Monday, very unusual for this area, there's only 4 polling places. One is in Nottingham, which is Country Place, a memorial near Dairy Ashford. It's in the community center. There's another one on Voss near Westheimer in an apartment complex. There's another one at La Quinta in the Galleria on Post Oak. And then the 4th one is downtown off of Congress. I'm not sure who's going to vote there, but there's one downtown as well. The election is January 25th. And the process here is, like I said, the unusual thing that happened on Monday, 164 ballots were cast. Half of them were Democrat and half were Republican. And so it sort of caused a stir as to what is the trend going on. But keep in mind, there's a diversity issue that's on the west side of Beltway 8, which is where Nottingham's at. And so it's an unusual circumstance there. It caused a few of my colleagues to get very nervous at yesterday's meeting. But either way, if there is no winner, it'll be a runoff. And I'm being told that it probably will be in April, but it could be earlier if circumstances change. But there's something about a 30-day election, special election, uh, that's after a regular election, and our regular one's going to be March 1st.
Okay.
So I'm expecting if there's a runoff, it'll be in April. And what I need right now, there's only four polling places. During the election, there's going to be 28. And so the vast majority of voters are going to come out on the 25th. The problem is nobody knows that there's an election on the 25th.
I was
And
going to
so,
say that.
yeah, there's very
All
little.
right. Well, we will continue to remind them, Chief. We're going to move on to our next guest, and we want to wish you the very best. Hopefully, we'll have you back on so you can give us an update and keep us posted. Thank you for taking time out this morning to join us. So get back out to the campaign trail. Take care. All right.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Kronda's up next, so why don't you introduce Kronda, running for state representative in District 65.
She is a candidate for Texas House District 65, and she's been living in that district for the last 30 years. And her name, I'm going to try to pronounce her last name. Kronda Timesch.
Timesch.
Oh, I did it right.
Yeah, I think that's right. Kronda, are you with us?
Kronda, good morning.
Can you hear me?
We hear you
Yes.
fine.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for your time. Did I say it right, your last name?
It is, I know, Kronda Timesch. The H is silent. My husband's family is from Luxembourg in Germany. So definitely, it's great. Once you remember that name, it's hard to forget.
Right.
It is, yeah, but I was reading your bio a little bit, and so your last name comes from your husband, but you're coming from Hispanic roots.
I do. So my mother's family settled in northern New Mexico in about the 1720s. They settled, if you're familiar with northern New Mexico, between Cuba and Farmington, New Mexico. My grandmother actually grew up in an adobe home with dirt floors and no electricity. And so, this having that roots going back for, decades, it really, or centuries, provides a different, so it was my grandmother, Rose Mascareñas, and then Tafoya. And there's actually a monument where my mom's family was raised in northern New Mexico to the Martinez family.
So, Kronda, tell us a little bit about the district. For those watching and don't understand where District 65 is, what part of the state of Texas?
Well, thank you so much for asking. And for those of us that live here, they're still learning. As with the redistricting, it looks completely different. So we're in the northern part of Dallas. We're in Denton County. So if you're looking at Dallas, we're at about 12 o'clock. Denton County is straight north of Dallas. And then there is, if you're looking at Denton County, Tan Parker's former district, House District 63, runs along the southern border of Denton County, bordering Dallas County. And then I'm what you would say is a rainbow across that district for House District 65. We begin with City of Dallas, Denton County residents, and go up to Carrollton, Plano, and then go across the county and end in Fort Worth at the Texas Motor Speedway.
Now, have you held public office before, Kronda, or is this your first bid for public office? And how many other candidates are in the primary to seek the Republican nomination?
Okay, great questions, Orlando. I've served 2 terms on the Louisville ISD School Board, which is the 15th largest school district in the state of Texas. We have over 53,000 students in our school district and 6,500 teachers and staff members in the district. And our district is a little bit unique in that it includes 13 different cities and communities in 127 square miles. So definitely a lot of great experience working with multiple municipalities and a large area. And then in the Republican primary, I have 2 opponents.
So, Kronda, tell us a little bit of your background, and why you start deciding running for offices in the previous position and this position.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So, uh, have always my husband and I owned two businesses. One, we started out of our garage here in the district 31 years ago, a landscape company. And then we have been actively involved in our community and our schools. We have amazing public schools here in Texas. And so just began with, had the opportunity to run for office as both a businesswoman and a active community volunteer, and felt like that was a strength to our district, as we have such a large budget for school districts. For your largest budget is in your school districts, significantly larger than most municipalities. Um, and so for us, handling that with my business background, I felt like would bring a great strength, which it did, to our school district. And then was asked in 2020 to consider running for state rep, and at the time was serving on school board, and really prayed about it. And I feel like the experience that I had as a school board trustee and as a business owner, that perspective is a unique perspective that I could bring that voice down to Austin. I'm currently serving on the Child Protective Services Board, and have really learned a lot about the incredibly increasing needs that we have for our children, both in the foster care system, as well as our children aging out of the foster care system, and the need for increased care for families that are affected by foster care. So all of those, I think, are going to give me a perspective that's going to be unique in this Texas State House.
Kronda, one of the biggest issue that I think the legislature has to grapple with every 2 years, obviously, is education. Andrea and I have been very active in keeping up with education issues, particularly here. We are the third largest school district in the nation in Houston. Here's the way I see it from an urban school district that I live in. There seems to be a disconnect between what happens and the outcomes in rural areas versus urban areas. There seems to be a different mindset from rural and urban state legislators and senators who are ultimately responsible for school issues. In Houston, as you know, we have a series of failing schools. They have for years failed the taxpayer, the parents, and the students. These are schools whose performance is horrific, and the education commissioner, according to statute, according to legislation passed by an African American state representative from the Houston area many years ago, the state is supposed to shut down those schools. They're sort of going into like a receivership, right? Where people come in and oversee the operation of this school district because it's got so many failing schools. But there seems to me that the issues that are affecting Houston, perhaps Dallas, I'm not, don't live in Dallas, need to be addressed by the state legislature. And when it comes time to address issues affecting Houston, the rural school districts and their representatives don't want to do it because they're happy with their school districts. So how do we address education issues in Texas, and get rural members on board to help us with the largest populations, which are the urban populations? How do you fix that disconnect?
No, and that's a great question, because often you'll hear that so many policy decisions are not, Republican versus Democrat. A lot of them are urban versus rural. And where I live, it's actually, I would say, even a carve out the third group would be suburban, because there, we have, a different. We have great schools in our area, but it's very different than your large Houston and Dallas school districts. And so the question I think that we're going to have to look at is, how can we create policies? Like, we've given, a lot of freedom for our schools that are, our charter schools. I think that are there opportunities where we're looking at, we've got 5.5 million students in public schools here in Texas, and we have almost 1,200 school districts. Texas is large. It has incredibly unique needs. Do we, as a state body, need to consider how can we not provide legislation for one school district, or how can we create opportunities that solve some of the problems that we're looking at in Houston ISD? If that's not a problem in a different part of the state, how can we help the students that in Houston ISD students that are living in failed districts, 4 and 5 and 6 years? What can we do for those areas to make sure that these children are getting the education now? And then I think what creates more of a putting our foot to the gas pedal is we're coming out of COVID, where our kids have been in remote learning for a year and a half. We're continuing to see, across the board, where students learning, is not on pace with what it had before. Now we're coming with other issues that are being tagged with that now need to be addressed. As students are coming back into the classroom, there's difficulties getting everybody back on the same page with consistency. And so I think that we're going to have people that are willing to, all come to the table, roll up our sleeves, and really consider options that we've, had hard conversations of what we can do, because at the end of the day, our goal needs to be providing the very best education for every student in Texas, regardless if they're in my backyard or they're in a different part of the state. And so those are things that I want to be a part of and willing to have those hard conversations.
I don't know where the system went off the rails, Kronda, because I'm an immigrant in this country. I came to Texas in 1962. I went through the public education system. I didn't even speak English. I was a Spanish speaker. We didn't have bilingual education. But I felt that I got a very good education in the 60s in the public school system. Since then, my opinion is that not only has property school taxes become overly burdensome to the average taxpayer, but the quality of education has come off the rails. And here's what's sad about it. The state legislature and the current leadership are the ones responsible for providing an adequate education to children across the state of Texas. We have been grappling, and I call it this slow motion train wreck, in Houston for the last 10 years with failing schools. And I know Commissioner Morath has tried to take over these failing schools. Now some interests have filed lawsuit against the state of Texas because they say that the statute that we're operating under, meaning where we have failed schools for a period of time, is unconstitutional because we're removing the elected representatives that are chosen by the people. That's all working through the courts. We've got a million lawyers involved using taxpayer money to fight that litigation. Meanwhile, the kids are being failed. The parents are being failed. The taxpayers are being failed. And it's not just in Houston. I suspect that there are other major urban school districts in Texas. And the question is, when is the state legislature going to get together and address public education in Texas? This excuse of, well, the urban superintendents and like this, and they don't want to change that, but it's time that the leadership, because at the end of the day, conservatives in Texas are in charge and have been in charge for 25 years, since we ran Ann Richards out of office. And I remember back in the days where, the Democrats tried to address public education. I remember when Mark White was governor of the state of Texas, he came up with a program called No Pass, No Play, where if you weren't passing in a school, you couldn't play sports. And, it actually did improve student performance. Students started to focus. The coaches made the students focus on academics rather than so much time on the athletic field. And so there's no question, Kronda, that education issues are tough. It's not a cookie cutter. So what works in, Denton County and what works in Brackettville, Texas, down in Kinney County is not going to work in Harris County. But I still say, with your experience in public education, is that the legislature better get to work on public education issues quickly, because I think conservatives are going to be blamed for this train wreck that we have currently. And so I hope that I hope when you're elected, you get on some important committees that address that issue. Now, so in your district, District 65, what are the other important issues facing your constituents?
So, as I've been block walking for months now, I can tell you that one of the number one issues continues to be the border, and just what's coming across. The questions then is with borders are, safety, security, as well as for those of us, I-35 runs up. I have in my district I-35W and I-35 East, and that's considered the drug corridor for drugs getting into the United States, as well as human trafficking. And people don't realize that even in their neighborhoods here in Denton County, we continue to see an increase in human trafficking, and the results are horrific for those that are affected by it. And so, border security, absolutely. People want to see our borders closed. They want to see that who's coming across. They want a legal process of immigration. They want us to be fighting tooth and nail against any policy that allows people just to come in across the borders without any vetting. The other issue is, as you mentioned, Orlando, and this is an issue in Denton County, is with appraisals and the appraisal district and taxes, where people are understanding that you can have your taxes kept the same by your local municipal entity, but the appraisals means that you're going to be paying a larger check to the district every single year. And so, how do we work on appraisal reform? And so that's something that's a conversation that we've had. People have very positive comments continuing to understand why we passed the election integrity bill. I had somebody say they went to the dry cleaners to pick up their clothes, and they had to show a driver's license. So if you have to show a driver's license to pick up your laundry, very simple to pick up your voter registration, show your driver's license to vote. So that continues to be something that people want to see. And then another conversation that I see is election integrity. People want to have elected officials that what they say in the district, what they say out on the campaigning trail is the same thing that they're saying when they're down in Austin, and that transparency and integrity is really important to them. As well as, the fifth is defunding the police. That's huge here in Denton County. Yeah. We do not want to see any defunding of our first responders.
What, in your opinion, can the state do specifically with respect to illegal immigration crossings?
For me, as Governor Abbott continuing to work on closing the borders where we can, where can we use drones? Where can we provide increases in making sure that those checkpoints, because I think what people don't understand is when somebody pays to come across, they're not ensuring that these families are brought across with water or driven to a location for safety. So many stories of where children and women have just been left in areas with no access to get to safety. And so I want to make sure that we provide, as Governor Abbott has started as doing, is providing resources to that area. And I think fight as hard as we can against the Biden administration. We have to, our federal government is working as hard against us as we're trying to work to keep that border closed.
Yeah, how to get in the middle, with this is a federal issue, immigration, but of course it's affecting the local cities and affecting the states and affecting the people in big cities and in rural areas. How to get into that gap between the federal government and the state government?
Right, and I think that I think that people are really understanding the importance of, I think our congressional races next November are going to see that when those seats are flipped. And then we're going to have members in Congress that will be able to stand up and say, no, we're not going to move forward or support any of Biden's policies. We can now begin to work against those, because for those of us that live in Texas, we understand, these people that are coming across, they have families, they need to feed their families. We need to vet people, provide opportunities for them to work. And that's why we want to have a legal process, so that when they come in, they have the opportunities.
Well,
Sorry, Orlando, I thought you were going to have a question.
No, we have a legal process. That's not the issue. I mean, there is a legal process to immigrate into the United States. The issue is that we, as a country, have an insatiable appetite for cheap labor, and so I'm always somewhat, amused. I know that the governor's trying to do what he can with the surge, but that's several $1 million out of the taxpayers' money of the state of Texas. We have no authority with respect to immigration. I mean, I live down on the border. I'm a taxpayer along the border. We send DPS down there. What can they do? I mean, they can stop somebody and give them a citation, but we have no authority to detain and undocumented or uninspected, as they call, immigrants. So I just don't understand. It seems to me that we would be better served, Kronda, if we tried to diminish the appetite for cheap labor. And so, it's just such a game, because if we really wanted to stop illegal immigration, illegal crossings, you would go after the source, and the source is the people that provide employment to the undocumented alien. And we don't do that. We don't have domestic enforcement. We're all focused on the border. That's irrelevant. If you cut the employment source off, then you wouldn't have the crossings. Because if you really enforced the fact that you have to have a Social Security number that's verified, then and you find the employers, then you begin to dwindle the number of illegal crossings, in my opinion. Is there something you think domestically here in the state of Texas we can do?
No, in my industry, that's a conversation that people have all the time. I'd say absolutely ours, we have people document all of employees that we have are either on work visas or here in the United States. But from my business experience, we're not looking at checking people that are paying taxes on that. I don't know how we can fix that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, how do we go after the employers?
Well,
that
I'm sorry. The way to fix Kronda, the way to fix it is you have to have a will. And it doesn't appear that we have the will to do it. I mean, there are 30 million undocumented. We have an echo. Real bad. It's her side. Okay.
Is it my side? Here you go.
30 million people are employed in this country, and until we have a strong domestic enforcement, I don't think we're going to get our hands around it. But you're absolutely right. There is a horrible effect on our communities with respect to crime, with respect to gangs, with respect to sex trafficking, and it's going to continue to affect Texans, and it's going to continue to cost us a lot of money. So listen, we want to thank you for taking the time out to be with us. I know you're busy on the campaign trail. You got the. By the way, have they set the primary date yet, or is that still working its way through?
They have, and it's actually starts. Yes, thank you so much, Andrea. So it's Valentine's Day. So if you love Texas, I'd love to have your vote on February 14th. Early voting is so much easier to go. You can vote anywhere. For people to get out and vote early, and so and then March 1st is Election Day.
Wow, so Valentine's.
So that's set, Kronda. I haven't followed that. We got a bad echo. Okay, well, thanks, Kronda. I appreciate you being with us, and we'll try to keep up with you, and we'll give everybody an update.
All right, thank you so much.
Kronda, thank you so much. We have echo.
we have bad echo.
Back echo, but we don't
We
need
can't get rid of
the
our echo.
headsets
Okay.
anymore. So we can.
So
take
Gina
it off.
Prickett, as you know, who heads up Leadership Latino,
Yeah.
texted and wanted us to remind everybody that we're going to be in El Paso
In El
with
Paso.
Leadership Latino. We have some excellent presenters up there. We have Dan Corrales, who was recently elected as a city council member in Midland. He's coming to El Paso to talk to our potential new candidates. We
John
have
Lujan.
we have John Lujan, who just won the state representative special election in South portion of San Antonio. I think it was House District 118. We have Bobby Everly that's joining us,
Yeah.
who is a nationally syndicated news presenter. And so we have some exciting stuff. If you want to participate, and if you're in El Paso, it's what, January 29th?
January 29th, yeah.
Okay.
So we're flying from Houston on the 28th. We're going to be all day long on the 29th and coming back on the 30th. I'm so excited. I haven't been in El Paso in many, many, many years. You always recommend, what is the name of the restaurant that we're going to go?
Well, there's several good restaurants.
Several good
Yeah.
restaurants, okay.
So we're going to go to them. But if you want to register for the next Leadership Latino class, just go to our website. You can go to leadershiplatino.com, or you can go to Texas Latino Conservatives, and there should be a link to Leadership Latino.
Register at no cost.
Yep, and it's a class that basically you're going to learn all about the political process, the entire infrastructure, whether you want to be a candidate for office, whether you want to be a precinct chair, whether you want to be an SREC member, whether you want to be a press secretary for a campaign,
Or a leader of your community.
a campaign manager, a leader in your community. You want to learn how to speak, do public speaking. You want to know how to write a press release. You want to know how to file your ethics commission forms as a candidate. We'll take care of all that in one day. And but you've got to sign up. So it's Leadership Latino on the website. It's no cost to you. And we will be in El Paso, Texas on January 29th.
And visit us in Texas Latino Conservatives. Not only you're going to find the link for Leadership Latino, but also become a member. Help us to help. We need contributions, and we want more members. It's only $35 a year. And also you can add an extra contribution if you love us too.
That's right. So thanks for tuning in. And also I'm told by our wonderful producer, Mark, says that we now will have telephone lines. So hopefully
We do.
next week
Oh, wow.
we should be able to have you live call in. So for those of you, we've always had that. You can click on a link.
That people that I think
I know
they
people
don't
don't wanna be on
understand,
camera.
or they don't want to be
Yeah.
on camera, but they can call.
So, but now we'll be able to put up a phone number, and so you can call in studio and
That's
participate
excited.
and ask your questions. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And don't forget, Leadership Latino, January 29th in El Paso, Texas.
Nos
Sign
vemos
up.
el próximo miércoles. Chao, chao.